Art teachers of Reddit, what was the most frightening piece of art you've seen? I suppose the picture itself was not as frightening as the implications behind it. In pediatrics we're taught about developmental milestones, the normal age ranges for kids to start walking, talking, etc. Kids who come from neglectful or abusive environments often reach their milestones later, if at all. It's difficult to start crawling if you're starved, or learn new words if adults don't acknowledge you or enroll you in school. I ran a small art group which included a very nervous and twitchy 8-year-old boy who had been recently adopted by very supportive parents. The other kids were painting what everyone paints: animals, flowers, houses, friends, patterns. Drawing is actually a developmental milestone. By about 4 you should be able to copy a circle, cross, and square. By his age you should be able to draw complex figures. He spent 50 minutes painting his canvas brown, with a green squiggle in the corner. It's all he could do. His hands were uncoordinated and he had trouble concentrating. He kept jumping at noises and looking at the exits. He carefully placed it on the racks to dry, and when his parents came to pick him up, they would and awed like it was the Mona Lisa. You did a fantastic job. I love the colors. We'll go shopping later and find a frame for it to hang in your new room. Not an art teacher, but I had a student that all the other teachers were afraid of. They swore up and down he was going to be a school shooter or serial killer or something. He got transferred into my elective class because it was my first year teaching. No one else wanted to deal with him, and they knew I wouldn't protest. Anyway, this kid would ignore directions and scribble in his notebook. He wrote creepy poems and he always drew knives. He was obsessed with knives. After a few weeks of slowly building a bit of rapport with him, I realized he just enjoyed getting a reaction and shocking people by saying and doing odd stuff. So one day I just sat with him and asked him what was up with all the knife drawings. He admitted that his uncle forges knives as a hobby. I guess his uncle was like a father to him, and he'd designed these knives and they'd work on actually creating them together. He brought in some actual pictures and was incredibly proud. He was actually a really funny, really cool kid who just had a tough home life. I hope he ended up alright. That's surprisingly wholesome. Not what I was expecting. My 8-year-old student drew a picture of how his stepfather was peeing on him. I proceeded to ask my student about this, and he just said, "That's what we do when we have playtime, when mom is not home." Needless to say, I cried my eyes out and called the cops. Not an art teacher. A friend of mine has face blindness due to a traumatic head injury when he was younger. He has to use body type, odor, and the sound of your voice to identify you. Many times I have seen him just staring at me, not knowing who I am until I speak. At one point he casually mentioned to me that he can tell when someone is tired because they smell different. He has problems watching movies when characters have the same skin tone and height. He took an art class and final project did a face drawing of his girlfriend. It was just so off in some uncanny valley disturbing way that I cannot describe well. Almost as if the subject had literally no emotions. I remember telling him, "My god, is this what you actually see when you look at people?" A sentence I will never forgive myself for saying. I'd love to see this. Knew a kid that had an enormous drawing book with basically every page a drawing of a scorpion. The scorpions were meh quality, except for the stinger, which was basically perfectly drawn, with 100 times the detail and realism as the rest of the body. I never asked why he drew it. Reminds me of that either nice girls thread or creepy women thread on AskReddit. Dude had this girl that was interested in him, and she would draw horses. Most of the body was meh decent quality, but the penis was super detailed. I was the student at an all-girls Catholic HS. In ceramics LL we were supposed to make a mobile. I spent a lot of time making all these tiny sperm out of clay, so they could swim to a clay egg. I got in trouble and had to make some balls star crap to pass this stupid class. I'm sort of imagining your original piece and it honestly sounds super cool and interesting. A shame they made you scrap it. Assigned a self-portrait. Simple assignment. Kid comes back with this demon in heck. Okay, take a closer look and he has cut his own hair and added it in ponytail fashion to the demon. Look closer and the hooves on the demon are his actual fingernails. I am positive his own blood was used as well. That day he pulled a knife on someone in the hallway. Never saw him again. For your information, gave that crap to the counselor ASAP. Now this kid is an artist. Used to teach art at a boys and girls club. A 3rd grader student of mine drew a blowjob with a bit too much accuracy and said it was of her and another student she had a crush on. She told me that her older sister's boyfriend comes to help babysit and she walked in on them. She was told it's how girls show they really like a boy and swore not to tell their mom. Probably doesn't qualify as frightening. Sorry if it's no good for this colon. I don't know what the other commenters are talking about. This story had a way more upbeat ending than I was expecting. I'm not a teacher, but I'll tell you what I saw back in high school. I was in this psychology class and had a close friend group with me in the class. There was this one kid who didn't seem to have any friends in the class. No one was ever mean to him or anything, but he didn't talk to anyone and no one talked to him. That was it. There was this one substitute teacher who worked at our high school a lot, so I had her for a variety of classes. She really liked doing this thing where the students would draw a house, and she would psychoanalysis them based on their drawing. I had already done this before when she brought it up to my psychology class, so I knew what to expect. So anyway, this kid, this quiet, friendless kid, he draws a house. Only that there are drawings of tied up women in and around the house. The sub didn't even go near trying to psychoanalyze that one. As someone studying psychology, it really drives me crazy that someone would instruct their students to draw pictures to psychoanalyze them. It doesn't help at all in giving psychology a better scientific reputation but instead reinforcing Freudian stereotypes. I might have been. I got hauled into the principal's office in high school over a drawing of my D&D character, who had a spear. This was an all-girls Catholic school, so maybe they were bored. They still have the audacity to mail me letters begging for money. I should write them something rude. Send them a copy of 4th edition. Nothing ruder than that. I'm actually a student, but one of my classmates drew a picture of him in heck screaming with flames engulfing him, along with other imagery such as skulls and stuff. He was a really talented artist, so everything was rendered really realistically. I remember my teacher saying it was reflective of how homework stressed him out, though I'm not sure that's the real reason. Not a teacher, but I wrote a story in high school about a man who murdered his wife after treating her to the most romantic night she'd ever had. It was a pity kill because she was terminally ill. Guess who ended up in the office? My art teacher told a story about one of his ex-students that got a nosebleed in class and used his blood to paint a squirrel. Improvise, adapt, overcome. I once had a student bring in photos of a crucified squirrel. He did the crucifying. This was right after the Virginia Tech shooting, so it was unnerving. After talking to him, I discovered that he'd found the squirrel already dead, and so he nailed the carcass to a tree to make a point. He ended up being an cool, weirdo artist. Another one, not so cool, bought 2 bunnies at a pet shop, killed them and turned them into little bunny slippers. That one really haunts me. I'm horrendous at art, but I'm a teacher at a behavior school, so I'm kind of a dancing monkey and have to teach everything, including art once a week. For context, I'm a female in my mid-20s. Last year I had an older, really creepy kid who'd recently got out of juvie who I had in my art class. I avoided him as much as possible, so didn't notice until it was pretty much done that he'd drawn a pretty graphic, labeled picture of him fricking me up the ass. Police were called in over it, and he ended up going to jail over an aggravated assault a couple weeks later. I see a lot of crap in my job, but that's the only thing that's really made my skin crawl. I guess this didn't really frighten me at the time, but it's more just funny but also sad. This really sweet kindergarten boy loved me. He drew pictures of me all the time. One day, he gives me a drawing of me, him, and his brother. So it's me in the middle, and he and his brother have bandanas over their mouths and gang clothing, all red, both pointing a gun at me. The thing is, he was so excited to give me it, and when I asked what they were holding, he said guns. That kind of stuff was so normalized in his life he didn't even realize they were bad. Like, though he made he and his brother bloods, he did draw hearts all over their outfits. I showed his older brother and he just looked sad. Thinking back, I also had a student that I was told was freaking nuts. He had been moved from one school to ours, and in our district it is really hard to be expelled. And he drew this creepy picture with all sorts of weapons on it and wrote stuff like murder, die, kill them, etc. Weird thing is, he gave me that drawing, turned it over to the school psych, who later told me when she talked to him about it he just smiled and laughed in a creepy voice. I was teaching elementary school, homeroom, not art. One girl is very bright, flies through her work flawlessly, then acts very inconvenienced that the other kids can't catch up. She requested the corner of the room and I obliged because why not, and she usually hunches over and barely looks at me during class. One day I was administering a spelling test and she was doing her usual thing. Write the word quickly, flip the page and draw. Write a word, flip and draw. When I got a test, I quickly flipped it against her will to find a 4-panel comic. The first panel was clearly me in front of class telling her she is a great student. Second was her ignoring me. Third said 10 years later in big bubble writing, and the fourth was her shooting me in the head. 1. High school overindulged punk drew a very gory landscape with bloody trees. He titled it "One Dead Baby Nailed to 9 Trees." Laughed his butt off when I referred him to the counselor. 2. Art and media class. Very odd freshman boy asked me to help him find students to act in his movie because he does not like to talk to people. Sure, no problem. Tell me a little about your film, I say. The protagonist, himself, wanders around the city stabbing people in the head and absorbing their energy so that he can stay alive and do cool things. He said he needed at least 5 students, but 12 or 20 would be better, and he did not want to actually have to speak to them beforehand. I referred him to our school psychologist and he quietly dropped my class the next day. The first one sounds creepy in terms of the art itself, but not problematic in terms of the intentions and morals or whatever of the artist. I can imagine drawing something like this in high school. The second one is kinda fricked up for numerous reasons. Not a teacher, but a student in art class with a professor that absolutely hated me because I was a digital artist and liked to draw animals. She believed everything digital art related was just downloaded off Google, even when I demonstrate with my portable tablet how my art was made. After enduring a lot of ridicule over what I wanted to draw, when the assignments were vague as draw daily, and having her scream at me during a presentation, I decided for the sake of my grade that I would do my final project as a traditional piece of art and I would make it as freaked up as possible. I painted a canvas black, then cut myself enough to get some blood to paint smears with onto the canvas. Then I crushed up painkillers and glued them onto the canvas, and stuck on band-aids. I think I also painted a knife on, but I can't remember. All that sticks out in my memory is the blood and painkillers. I got an A. She loved it, and the rest of the class, in critique, did too. Art teachers in university are so weird, lol. Bruh, that's some dedication. Student here, and it was more stupid than disturbing. I had this idiot sit next to me in middle school during the final semester of 8th grade. We were doing the final exam and oil painting self-portraits with one word on the side to describe ourselves. The kid on my side, unlike the other words people had used, faithful, loyal, loving, brave, soccer, etc., puts Putin for his word and proceeds to hang it up without authorization in the cafeteria. Needless to say, he got in trouble and wrote Asian on his second attempt. Gosh, he was crazy. I assume he was neither Russian nor Asian. Not a teacher, but in middle school, we had an assignment where we had to act like news reporters, including writing a detailed backstory on why we got into that profession. I was a huge fan of the CSI type TV shows, still am. I wrote about how my character's parents were murdered when I was a child, and how I grew up doing my own investigations to try and find the killer, eventually leading me to a life of investigating and reporting news to help solve other murders. I wasn't graphic in my descriptions, but my teacher was very concerned. She pulled me to the side, asking me first if I am suicidal, then asking if I want to kill my parents. One trip to the principal's office and a meeting with my mom later, I wrote a new backstory about how my character grew up in a town called Happyville where nothing bad ever happened, and I talked about happy news all day and everything was happy and sunshine and rainbows. Super sarcastic. Meanwhile, in another class, One of my classmates wrote a very detailed story about a guy who murdered people by throwing them in a wood chipper. Blood, guts, and gore galore. He was praised for his skilled writing ability. The trick is to find out whether the art teacher prefers CSI or Fargo first. My elementary school teachers were always worried about my art projects. They've had so many meetings with my parents. Pictures I draw would have blood-covered grass or trees on fire. Then one day in 3rd grade we had a substitute art teacher. He had a brilliant realization. I wasn't a disturbed child. I was colorblind. I am red-green colorblind and blue-purple colorblind. My son is colorblind. We came to this realization just this February. The other day I asked him to grab me the pink towel, and he was taking forever. When he comes back he says, "Mom, you only have a white towel hanging up." At that moment I remembered he is colorblind, lol. Not a teacher, but I went to Cambodia with my parents when I was 15. A man they knew runs an association there taking care of street kids and disabled kids living off the streets. We went to visit one of their structure, and I befriended with a boy that was my age. He showed me some of his drawings, and I also had the opportunity to see some made by the other kids. It depicted atrocities committed by the Khmer Rouge that they witnesses. Piles of skulls, heads rolling off, people on their knee, dead parents with the kids crying, all in kids' drawings. That was so sad and disturbing. Well, that's what the Khmer Rouge did. Pretty messed up stuff. It's sad that so many people still suffer the consequences from the genocide back then, especially kids. I hope that kid you saw got better though. An adorable, bright-smiled, dimpled 7-year-old would complete every task to the letter. Watercolor boats, bowl of fruit, self-portrait, paper mache hat. After completing a fairly competent rendition of the model, he would then paint the entire project black. Every time, all black. As a kid I loved drawing girl faces, princess faces, but the bodies were difficult. I solved the problems by drawing a lot of princess heads. But I wanted the picture to make sense, so I drew an evil witch queen who cut off all those princesses' heads and put them on a shelf. My mom almost put me in therapy. For my wedding my aunt gave it to me, framed. My goal in life is to be that aunt. Not a teacher, but in grade 7, a student sitting near me whipped out their sketchbook. I had seen their previous drawings, and they were really cool. Then they flipped to a page with soldiers outside of a school that was on fire, dead people everywhere. Don't remember if they were children. There were soldiers loading a mortar and some approaching the school with weapons drawn. It was a very detailed drawing too. My mother has been doing research with some doctors on kids with dyslexia. It wasn't frightening as much as sad, I think. But hey, I'll pitch in. The kid must be 11-12. The doctor asked the participants to draw whatever they want, to see if dyslexia affects their drawing abilities maybe. The kid drew himself holding a gun to his head. When the doctor asked why, he said it's because he's very sad. Turns out the kid gets bullied for his dyslexia in school. My mom almost cried. I teach in a psychiatric hospital and we had to step a patient up to a higher level of care because he was on our outpatient unit, and he drew a picture of everyone in outpatient dead or bleeding out in the classroom and him standing in the doorway. That's the only kid I've ever been a little nervous around. He would look through you. He had a hard time telling us his emotions and claimed to have none. I hope he's okay now. I'm not an art teacher, but remember something super fricked up that I used to draw as a child. A guy using a fishing pole, fishing line kind of thing, to hang another guy in a fit of fire. Bing dung bung dung, dung, dung. Love is a burning thing, and it makes a fiery ring. Bound by wild desire, I fell into a fit of fire. I fell into a burning fit of fire. I went down, 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 and the flames went higher. And it burns, burns, burns. The fit of fire, the fit of fire. Obligatory, not a teacher, but art student. I was in a jewelry class and one girl had a girlfriend who was a nurse, so she drew her blood and made a gorgeous necklace for the vial to keep it in. She had to mix it with something, but it was basically entirely black. She had another piece for a vial of her girlfriend's hair. I spooked a sub on accident once in middle school. Our teacher left us a 4-panel comic with a cat and a mouse. Think Tom and Jerry, Itchy and Scratchy, etc. I don't remember exactly what was in each panel, but the gist of it was that the mouse was preparing to chase the cat. We were instructed to invent some dialogue and further illustrate and create a story. It was a pretty balls assignment designed to waste time towards the end of the semester, and I didn't want to do it, but the sub said it would be a participation grade. So I drew a Schutzstaffel mouse preparing to burn a Jewish cat in the fireplace. Was it in poor taste? Absolutely. Was it pretty funny? To the other middle schoolers, yes. Not so much to our older substitute, who took it pretty seriously. She called the office and was very upset and concerned I might be dangerous. I guess my blonde hair, blue eyes didn't help the whole thing. For about half a year I did the Holocaust in my Y10 history class. Me and my friends made so many Nazi jokes I'm surprised that didn't happen to us. Then later in English we had to rewrite the prologue for Romeo and Juliet and we set it in World War II Germany. Needless to say, the whole class thought we were Nazis. There was this one school assignment I had in health class that still sticks with me. It wasn't art, but we were assigned, for some unknown reason, to dredge up pictures of some of the different ways road accidents could harm or kill people. Maybe it was meant to be some sort of scare tactic for us high schoolers to stay safe on the roads. I don't know. We all drew randomly from a hat to determine the exact thing that we were supposed to be researching. Later we would present them to the class. I drew train accidents. I asked my teacher if she was 100% sure she wanted pictures of this, and she told me yes. I went to the internet and looked up pictures of train accident victims, cars hit by trains, people with legs cut off by trains, etc. Before presenting, I asked my teacher again if she was 100% sure that she wanted me to show my pictures to the class. She reassured me once more that it was okay. All she did when I showed the pictures was laugh her butt off. Not an art teacher, but I went to a liberal high school. A kid there wrote a poem that was basically a murder fantasy about his sisters. Really graphic. He showed this to the faculty, as it was an assignment. What was the outcome? It was published in a yearly book of poetry and short stories the school made. He was cited as brave and gifted. To this day, I'm afraid of remembering his name, typing it into Google, and finding out he killed his family. I'll do it for you. I helped my friend with her photography exam piece by laying an alias with fake blood dripping out my eyes, ears or mouth, or in my hair, a load of fake bruising, and for one picture, dislocating my jaw and shoulder, all of them with my eyes open, glazed. She got some great hyper-focused reflection of the skyline in my eyes in some of them. I can't remember why she was doing a photography final with the theme of murder, but she was one of the sweetest, most anxious and unassuming people you have ever met. I'm the one with the true crime obsession. Not a teacher, but when I was really young, like elementary student, we were drawing birds for our projects. At that time, I was super prone to nosebleeds, so I accidentally nosebled all over my goose drawing. Because I was too proud of my goose drawing to redo it, I just painted mahogany polka dots everywhere to cover up the blood on that paper. I never told the teacher, but looking back at it now, it's super obvious that there's blood on my drawing. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.